Alexandria Scott. I'm going to be your facilitator for tonight. And we'll go around and do introductions from the department, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kim Fritz-Ogren. I'm the Field Services Division Administrator at the department, and today I'm also the online moderator.
I'm Jason Spreet. I'm the East Region Manager for Water Resources at Baker City.
Alex Willis, I'm a Water Master, District 10.
Hey, Tiller, Assistant Water Master here in Burns.
Graham Thomas, hydrologist, and my main thing is prep.
All right, perfect. And folks online, I just want to do a quick check. If somebody can drop a thumb in the chat or something, let us know you can hear us okay. Great, thank you. Bear with us for a moment while we pull up the PowerPoint. If you want to go to the next slide, we already went through the housekeeping items. Again, if you're participating online, feel free to drop those questions in the chat and we'll get to those at the end of the meeting. All right, so just a couple things for you guys. The OWRD mission is to serve the public by practicing and promoting responsible water management through two key goals. And those are to directly address Oregon's water supply needs and to restore and protect stream flows and watersheds in order to ensure the long-term sustainability of Oregon's ecosystems, economy, and quality of life. Just a couple things for you folks. We do have a lot of stuff going on right now with the Water Resources Department in the Harney Basin. So we just wanted to take a moment and acknowledge those. So we have the Division 512 rulemaking going on. That's been going on since April of 2023. And those meetings are happening just about every month now. And those are for the groundwater allocation and management in the Harney Basin. We've got guidance for voluntary agreements going on right now. We've got technical assistance support for the Harney Community-Based Water Planning Collaborative here. We've got the Harney Domestic Well Remediation Fund. We've got data collection and analysis, the Conservation Reserve and Enhancement Program, which we'll be talking about here a little bit later, and then regulation enforcement, which is what we're going to be talking about this evening. Just a quick presentation overview. We're going to go over, groundwater level permit conditions. Why are we beginning to enforce on these now? We'll talk about that Conservation Reserve and Enhancement Program, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jason.
All right, once again, I'm Jason Spreet. I'm the East Region Manager for Water Resources. So the East Region is about a third of the state on the east side. It includes the Harney Basin, Harney County, Niagara County. So we'll get into some of these things here, but I want to emphasize that the main reason that I want to spend, the majority of the time tonight, I'd like to spend on just answering questions. We'll go over these few slides. If they don't answer any questions, I'm happy to do my best at answering any further questions about what we're talking about tonight. And if you have other questions, as Alexandria said, there's an opportunity in the back to put those there, and we'll get to you. So a little bit about permit conditions and where our authority comes from. So two statutes, ORS 537, 628, and 629. They're longer than what this says up here, but they provide the authority to for the department to, approve applications with conditions and limitations necessary for the protection of the public welfare, safety and health. And we began issuing permits with conditions back in the early to mid nineties. And as we've moved forward in time, pretty much every permit you see today will have some sort of condition. And the reason those conditions are there is historically so that we can get to an approval on a permit. You know, if you can agree to specific conditions, then we can allow that permit to go on and be approved. Next slide, please. So this is an example of language off an actual permit that talks about decline conditions. We'll talk both about decline conditions and reporting conditions tonight, but I'll start with the decline conditions. So a groundwater permit decline condition typically has a condition like this on it where it will say, you know, 3 or more feet per year for 5 consecutive years. Any of these conditions or any of these bullets are met, then water can no longer be pumped out of that particular well. That doesn't mean that in most cases, that doesn't mean that every well on the water right is off. That just means that particular well that has met that condition or tripped that condition is off. And what we've been going on is a 25-foot or more decline overall. That's the maximum. Any one well on most permits today can actually decline from a static water level of when it was drilled. Go ahead, next slide. And so back in December 30th, we sent out 17 letters. I'm sure some of you got those letters that basically had a list of wells that had tripped that decline condition and were regulated off. This is an example of what that letter looked like. This is just a template. These, so as I said, December 30th, there was 17 letters sent out to 17 different landowners. Most of those letters had multiple wells indicated on them that had tripped those static water level conditions and were regulated off. And so they were originally required to shut off by March 1st, 2025. The original letters were, next slide. So after, of course, as you could expect, we sent out those 17 letters. Those are sort of surprising to a lot of people that received them. So between Dally and I, we've got a lot of phone calls, talked to a lot of people in the community, realized that maybe the department was being a little too aggressive to just suddenly dump that on you folks. And so we decided through those conversations to extend that, rescind those original letters, extend that time frame out to March 2026. So we sent out new letters that rescinded those first regulation letters and reissued new ones with a new date of March 2026. And the idea there was just to allow people a little more time than just a couple of months to either figure out another solution, talk to Graham about prep, or find another way to deal with things over the next year, or also ask questions about what they could do. You know, a lot of questions that I got were about, you know, does this mean my entire permit is off? Things like that. And no, it doesn't. It means that if you have multiple wells on your permit, so you have 5 wells on your permit, 2 of them got shut off because of decline conditions, you can still use those other 3 wells as, you know, within the bounds of your permit. So next slide, please. So that, you know, encompasses kind of why those decline conditions were on there and what that process entailed. I'm happy to take additional questions on that at the end here. But now I'll talk a little bit about the static water level reporting condition. This is a similar condition, only this one requires that it's on the same type of permits and typically requires that each well is measured every year and reported, the static water level reported every year. And so really this is the data that we use to actually determine whether those other conditions are tripped or whether there has been severe declines on the permit. It's also handy for our groundwater section to, you know, to have its data for them to do research on what the declines or what the water level trend in the basin is. And so all of that information is useful for managing the groundwater in the basin. And this is an example of that text. And so, and the key thing to remember here is that these water levels need to be reported in March. It says, actually, if you look at the permit that's issued, most of those, if you have a static water level reporting condition on your permit, it will say most likely that those levels need to be reported in March and within 30 days of the actual measurement. So currently, based on the records we have today, there are about 114 wells on 38 different properties that have not reported or aren't up to date on their reporting conditions. So which means that they had not reported in 2024. And so some of those wells that were included in the original letters also are on that list. And so there's a little bit of overlap on that 114 wells. And so the plan moving forward is there will be letters sent to those landowners who have wells that do not have reported data in our database to get their levels up to date. And if those aren't up to date by, probably, 2025, then those wells will be off as of that letter. One thing I'll note about this is if you do get one of these letters that says you need to report, and you report in 2025, after we receive that report and we have that data, you can turn that well back on. Next. So why are we doing this now? Probably the question everybody had. So with these conditions, they are a piece of your permit. So just like the amount of water that you're allowed to use under their permit, these conditions are really the same kind of thing. If you use too much, we're going to shut you back on, to the amount that you're allocated on your permit. If these conditions aren't met, same thing. We have to enforce on those once we know about them. We've received a lot of feedback from the community, especially during the place-based planning process and the 512 process, that we need to start clamping down on unauthorized use. And so this is part of that moving forward. We're trying to address any unauthorized illegal use in the basin. And so permit conditions is, part of that. And it's also, as the third bullet point there says, it's part of the water master duties in the statute 540.045. And so here's kind of the timeline. So these are two different things. So there's static water level measurement conditions and there's groundwater decline conditions. The static water level measurement conditions, we'll send out a reminder letter that those are due in 2025, and that'll go out this month at some point. And that's actually going to go out statewide. Then in March 2025, hopefully folks that have neglected to send in that data will send in their data, by the end of March, end of April this year. And then as we get that data, we'll review those submissions. Those who reported and are now up to date can continue to use that well through 2025. Any that continue to fail to report, they don't submit any sort of report for your static water level on the wells under those permits, are regulated off until they come into compliance this year. And I want to point out again, those conditions typically say that those water levels need to be reported in March, and that's specific date because that is the time of year that the water levels are expected to be the highest in wells. And so we want to get that consistent data year to year. But for this year, if you submit anytime in 2025, you can start using that well again. It's been regulated off for those static water level reporting conditions. For groundwater declines, as I said earlier, we rescinded the orders that shut folks off in 2025, and you can go ahead and irrigate through 2025 until March 2026. Then March 2026, those are regulated off as stated in that well that everybody should have received, or stated in that letter that everybody should have received by now.
If you show decline.
If you.
It's not
yeah.
mandatory. You're not telling them right now that you only got 1 year, you're done next year. You're saying if you prove there's decline.
We have already shown declines in those wells. If you report data after that for next spring, then you can turn back on if it's back above the decline condition threshold. So, if you back up to that one more time. So after all of those, so we'll look at any additional data in 2025 to see if there are more wells that have trip decline conditions. If there are more wells that trip decline conditions, we'll send out letters to those landowners, shutting them off also in 2026. All right, next slide. I'll pass it over to Graham to talk a little bit about rep now.
Hi, I'm Graham. I apologize, this text is so small. And I'm gonna be speaking about Harney Valley CREP. CREP stands for Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. It's a program, a collaborative program between OWRD and the Farm Service Agency. It's nationwide. And we're about to launch one for Harney Valley specifically. If someone's eligible, there are 4 points to be considered for eligibility. You have to be the landowner, you have to be in the greater Harney Valley groundwater area of concern. Your water right has to be certified, and you also have to be able to show use of that you've been utilizing your water right. And if you are eligible, you can reach out to myself and FSA and we'll start that process. And that looks like, at first there'll be an initial meeting where you'll be given details and then you'll provide information on your land and water right. If you decide to move forward, essentially there will be a contract with OWRD and FSA, and your groundwater right will be voluntarily canceled permanently, and in return you'll receive payment, and that land can be changed over to conservation land. There's other details that, like, there's a mid-contract kind of management tool where you can graze, you can still use the land, you can lease it, use it for solar. There's plenty of options. And there are additional incentives as well. We have like in-kind cost sharing for capping wells. If you want to cap the well, you can keep it as a domestic well or a stock well. There's also incentives for if you're near springs or specific vegetation. That's a one-time payment, and that's tiered depending on where you're at. And then there's also like a sign up incentive. So upfront, you can get more payment. And then another important detail is the OWRD contract and is flexible in terms of the length. So it can be a year, 5 years, 15 years, and then the FSA contract is for 15 years. And so we were expecting to start enrolling folks in mid-January. Unfortunately, at the national level, we have not heard on when nationwide enrollment will begin. We expect it to be soon. And so if you haven't grabbed a flyer up front, I highly recommend it, and grab my contact. Other than the other important details, when this program was initially proposed, the rental rate was $185 per acre. And I just submitted a new proposed rate of $403. That should be approved here within the month.
Graham, I just want to clarify, so everybody knows I got this question today, when they're talking about a water right and say that goes on multiple pivots, it's the entire water right. it can't just be one of those two pivots that water right serves, so it's the entire water right, so.
Correct.
Your soul.
Does the department own those water rights after your 15-year term, or do you get them back?
So when the contract with OWRD is signed, there'll also be a signed affidavit. And there's a pretty standard process for voluntarily canceling a water right. And once that document is signed, the water right is permanently like decommissioned.
So we're open up for questions. Kim, do we have any questions online?
Not yet.
Great. All right, well, folks online, feel free to drop your questions in the chat if you have them, and we will go through them. Anybody in the room, questions? Yeah,
Question for Graham on the credit program. Is it still limited to 50? I see you got 150 acres. Is it limited to 50,000, or will we be able to get that changed?
So right now, the limit for the amount of land you can enroll in CREP is 150 acres. And this is due to there's a limit for how much someone can be paid yearly from the USDA, and that limit right now is $50,000. That's just the payment from FSA, not OWRDs. So right now it's 150. I will say CREP currently is funded by, from the USDA side is funded by the Farm Bill, and that's on an extension. And they've proposed 2 prior farm bills, and those farm bills propose to raise the limit to $125,000 per year, which would mean you could enroll 375 acres. And so Congress right now is beginning to work on a new farm bill, which should get approved hopefully later this year. So it would increase the maximum amount, but currently it's 150.
Is there any limitation on the state side?
There is not. Our limitation would be our funding, our biennium funding.
And did you already speak to that legislatively yet?
No.
No,
Is that your question? Do you wanna know how much funding?
Yeah, I know it's been worked on in the budgetary process, but like kind of when, so people can know when to support it too, as it moves through the process?
Yeah, so right now, every biennium, we receive $500,000. And there's a new bill coming through that we can roll this money over. So we should have roughly about $1 million now. And then come the next biennium, which is 2027, if we have enough interest, we'll probably go to the legislature and ask for more upfront funding to enroll more people.
Graham, if I can clarify for a moment, if the bill that is currently in front of the legislature passes, then we would have $1 million
Correct.
next biennium. So we have about $544,000 because there's sort of that interest each year. And the agency's budget presentation is in front of the joint subcommittee for natural resources next week. And so there is an opportunity for public comment, I believe, on February 20th on the agency's budget.
if there's interest, Kristen, I can send you the information.
Yeah, I think it'd be good for us to share out, because we definitely need to show support for it if we're gonna make it a viable option. Especially if there's an increase on the federal side, that'd be good.
I also just want to point out that on the FSA side of things, and I think the OWRD as well, but it's a 15-year contract and you cannot re-enroll. Our normal prep and general CRP, you can go for re-enrollment, but you cannot with this program. It's 15 years, and that's it.
Yes.
So let's say you have a water right that's servicing 2 pivots. They're 225 acre pivots, you have to give up the whole water right, you're talking about 250 acres.
Yeah, yeah, correct. Currently, you would unfortunately only be paid the 150. If the maximum amount was increased, then you could do that for 250.
So will that be retroactive or however you say that? So say you signed up now and then later on the federal government comes through, would your contract?
Yeah, I think we could have the flexibility to have that stated in the contract to ensure that.
Kristen, during the conversation, I apologize for coming in late, but was it mentioned the opportunity instead of just canceling the water right, that it can be converted to a stock well?
Yeah.
And back to regulations on the 17 letters that you sent out, that we didn't know about. So you're already you're sending them again next year. You're already writing it out this year ahead of time, so everybody has notice. Does this mean you said you're gonna, why enforce now? You're gonna start enforcing now. Is this kind of not necessary anymore for the rec meetings? Cause it doesn't seem like you're listening to anything we were trying to put together. You went out on your own and sent out them letters without us aware of them. I'm just curious, are you depleting the rec meetings, or you just want us to come in and see what you're gonna do next?
No, this process is totally separate from the RAC, and the RAC is.
It was separate from the rec, I agree.
Yeah.
We didn't know about it.
Right, well, we have been, like I said in the presentation, there's been a lot of pressure on the department to address it. It was brought up in the RAC, it was brought up.
Who is applying the pressure?
We've heard that from the place-based planning group, that we work on the place-based plan locally. We heard it early on in the RAC from a number of members that did.
You had heard it from the RAC that we said it might not have been here if you had done this 40, 50 years ago when people used to complain, but you've given out a lot of water rights, and I just don't understand why you're enforcing a law on people that did do everything by the book when you still got applications out there long and far spread. I mean, you're jumping so far ahead without any notice of ours before you cleaned up the mess you made earlier, is what that just really didn't make any damn sense at all.
So what we're doing is, what we are required to do by law, which is enforce permits.
Which it was a long time ago.
Yeah, and we should have done it a long time ago. I'm not gonna disagree with you at all there, Tony. It's definitely far down that road that we've gone, and
But we don't wanna just keep making mistakes and then, well, like you just did, you made a mistake jumping ahead of you haven't cleaned up the unfinished ones.
You mean the unapproved permits?
Yeah, there's people still wanting to drill.
I don't know where those are at in the process right now, but I can speak to what we're required to do, which is regulate the use of water, and that happens across the state. And this is just part of that process of, regulating by the conditions on your permit, by the conditions on your water right.
There's still people out there that are being told use it or lose it. In the meantime, someone that did everything you said to do in the last 5 years, got their water right, followed by a letter the next year, turn around, told them cease and desist. That just was a smack in the face that did not, that was totally, I don't know how anybody can accept that.
I guess I'm not clear on, are you saying that we issued permits and then?
You've been issuing permits for over 40 years, and you
Right.
turn around and tell everybody, use it or lose it, you gotta prove it up, save the water right. They spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to do what they're told to do, the American dream, and then they do it. And even on top of that, go above and beyond and put in efficient systems with LEPA systems, everything.
Right.
Do everything by the book, finally get their water right proved, even donate observation wells at their expense to you for you to turn around And we come up right after New Year's with a cease and desist your well use. I mean,
Right,
wow, didn't even get the third year payment made on the,
sure.
everything you told them to do.
Yeah, so I understand that frustration. I don't know of a situation where it happened that quickly, but I'm not saying it didn't.
It did.
But also as part of that process, you have an opportunity to look at those conditions on your permit and decide whether or not you want to move forward before you invest all that money.
Then it's hard to
See
not
that
follow
condition.
through with your deal, because then you have that, well, you didn't do it fast enough. In the meantime, they're looking all over and there's still applications out there, so they know the end isn't near. I mean, you haven't finished, you even extended, you even allowed some transfers to places that you said you weren't gonna do, and that was done.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm sorry, there's just a whole lot of stuff that don't make sense, that we're all supposed to just be glad you're gonna. I don't, it just. I don't know, just doesn't seem like you've always, and you guys aren't the ones doing it, it's always somebody we don't know who it is telling you, go spread the news. I just don't think we get it. I just don't think it's right.
Well, I mean, the permit condition regulation and enforcement is on me and Dally, all of the water master staff in the field. That's, that's all our job.
You're
and that's
supposed
what
to
we're-
regulate, but you also don't have, the people behind you aren't honoring their word to us before they tell you to honor that regulation.
Well, it's us doing the regulation. There's nobody upstream really telling me like you need to regulate this.
Well, then stop and wait till they, guys that aren't doing their job finish their job, because you're ahead of them.
You're saying we're ahead of the actual permit process for some of the people that have not been issued permits.
Let these people that did everything they did that you told them to do, at least try to get their stuff paid off. I mean, that's just like if you just bought a house and we send you a letter, you're done, you're fired. You just don't, it ain't right. It ain't there.
Yeah, well, I understand that it is a frustrating process, especially when we got multiple things going at the same time. But again, these permits are kind of like contracts, where you agree to these terms, then you can, then use the water. And if the terms aren't being met, then it's our job to regulate that water use off. And that's essentially what we're ended up doing. But I completely understand that it is frustrating. It's frustrating for us too, that, there are still pending permits out there.
And we as the RAC committee have been trying constantly to talk to you guys and try to work side by side instead of chopping the head off of individuals cold turkey like you are. We were trying to spread it out and see that for zoned areas, we tried to reduce. And you totally turned, you act like we wasted all 5 years or not. You went and sent them letters out behind our back, and then I got called by the customers and was told that they said you agreed to all that. No, we agreed that you needed to do that 40 years ago. You didn't do it.
Yep.
Then just like the news today and everything you get, you took something we said years ago and said, no, they said this is what we need to do. That was such a false statement.
Well, that wasn't years ago. That was during the place-based planning process.
Yeah, it's been during
RAC.
this meeting, but we said if you would have done that years ago, we did not say you should do it today.
No,
You
and
need
we
to
heard it,
chop
it needs to happen today. That's what we heard in the RAC. We heard that. If you guys, speaking to the Water Resources Department, the Water Resources Department should not regulate anybody off under the 512 critical groundwater area until we get illegal use under control in this basin. And that's what we heard. And so that's what we're trying to do. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, we could look back at meetings and see what it was said, but,
I believe you, what you gonna say?
I was gonna say, Tony, a couple years ago, we actually had a community meeting here at the Harney County Community Center. It would have been fall of 2022. And we actually sat down, it was right after we did the Groundwater Study Advisory Committee kickoff meeting. So it was November 2022. And we started having conversations about the Division 512 rulemaking, continued support for place-based planning, the CREP program. So we started reinvigorating all that work that folks talked about during the groundwater portion of place-based planning. And again, we continue to hear, we want you to enforce on illegal use from many folks, from domestic well users. We heard from place-based planning, just interested citizens. And we did make a commitment to regulate on permit decline conditions starting in 2024. So we did start signaling. Could we have continued that messaging? Yes, we could.
Until the permits are cleaned up, until the unfinished applications are done. So we knew where we were at. And then by then, we were hoping to have a plan, which we've been working on 10%. I mean,
Sure.
we've really been having meetings on the side and trying to get people to work together and everybody pull back a little bit of our community. Mainly to try to save Harney County, to save Burns, save Hines, save all the little stores. You go chopping everybody off all at once like that and it's gonna devastate this town. You can't, so again, rather than do what you did, I thought we would have had another meeting amongst all of us face to face, and we would have said, we gotta do something. Well, then we would have pushed the 10% and let's see if we can look what, you didn't do anything for 50 years. Why do we gotta do it overnight? I mean, let's do it gradually the other way. If it takes 50 years the other direction, let's do it slowly. I mean, that's better than destroying a community.
Sure, and I think under the 512 process, you know, that is what we're trying to do with the adaptive management and review every so often, you know, to get to a certain point. So we're not slamming everybody all at once with.
But you're doing it completely, some people.
Right, that have not met permit decline conditions or permit conditions, yeah, that's what
We couldn't have just cut them back 20% and just watch them 3 years.
Well, we just don't have the opportunity to do that, you know, I mean, it's what the permit says is what we have to enforce. And so that's what we did, and I understand it, but it's just like, you know, a surface water right out of the facilities, if somebody has their priority date is off, we shut them completely off, we don't shut them off, you know, a little bit.
They've been doing that consistently for 50 years.
Yeah.
Well, then they're prepared for it, they're used to it. But you haven't done anything here and you're doing something overnight.
Tony,
Yeah,
something else
and I
to
get
keep
that
in mind,
frustration.
these are on different time paths too, right? So we've got to start taking action now on addressing the groundwater level declines. And this is kind of that first line of defense that we're starting to work on. We've got the Division 512 rulemaking, which is a separate process. And we're talking with the Rules Advisory Committee, so that's that RAC that Tony mentioned. We're working with that group of community members to try to solidify those rules for curtailment, reducing water use. Right, so there is different ways to go about getting towards the same goal. This is one of those. We're just trying to do our jobs, we're trying to also be receptive to what we heard from the community, which is you need some time to adjust. We hear that, right? But another year of declines also has impacts. So we gotta take that into effect as well, right?
Gently.
So are you guys managing the state or just Harney County?
We do this in a lot of different areas of the state.
So this applies to the state of Oregon, this doesn't just apply to Harney County?
Yeah. Like where we have the information, and I'm not saying we have the information everywhere. We do have information on declines like a lot of in Umatilla area and some of that country. I know that we enforced some permit decline conditions. We've done it in Baker County before as well. When we have that information, we do address it across the state.
And that's kind of a weird answer.
Yes,
You
it
have
is.
the information.
When we have the information.
So the people that are measuring, you have the information, but the people that aren't, you don't have the information.
Right.
So they're gonna.
And
cut
we are
them
working
off.
on addressing that too.
So then you have the prior appropriation problem too.
Yeah, and you make a great point, you know, you and I talked about
Oh, yeah.
that before, and, it is, you know, it's prior appropriation is the basis for most regulation, but then, you know, you throw on top of that these permit conditions and it throws that out of whack.
Well, and I'd just like to talk a little bit about that, because we did a lot in these meetings say, why aren't you guys regulating, why aren't you enforcing? What I think that we didn't really understand as we were making those like asks is the complications of what Andy's brought up and articulated maybe better recently than before, but we're, as a RAC, better understanding is with these different permit conditions, you have different starting points with each of those. And so in the RAC process, I think it really feels like right now it has pulled the rug out from under us, because that wasn't on everybody's mind as we were having those conversations, as we were asking for regulation to occur. That was not a consideration that the RAC had until just recently.
None of us thought you were gonna turn all the old wells off and leave all the new wells on.
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
I didn't
common
either,
sense
to be honest.
Because
says that that's just
we
full
thought-
of litigation. You know what I'm saying? Why would you wanna do that? Sure.
Still play in, but with the permit conditions, it does completely throw prior appropriation sideways, which is why we were hoping through the RAC process that we could figure out how to present something to the commission that could be more equitable, because this isn't. It isn't. And that was, you know, I thank you guys for pulling it back for a year so that there's some time to think about it and work through this. But if through the RAC process, we can't be successful in putting it legal, it really will have been a waste of time for this community, because within the RAC process, the significant economic harm to a community has to be considered. And this absolutely goes against that consideration that is within the statute to consider.
Well, through the RAC committee, through all the things that we did, we as a RAC have literally went everywhere and got everybody to get more efficient. I mean, Dally knows. Dally's an awesome guy for being able to call and talk to all the time, and we know damn good and well, everybody's borrowed money to make things better and more efficient. They borrowed money to put meters on, they borrow all this money. And get a letter on January 2nd, it's like, wow, you know, now I know how the Indians felt. That was just smack in the face, I just don't get it. Way out of line. There was a lot of people that got everything built up and then thought they were doing their job and thought they would at least have enough time to pay things off before they got a letter like that.
Yeah.
And we, in the meantime, thought we were doing our job, getting everybody to get more efficient. We've seen a total change in our decline by everybody being more efficient, by fixing wells and not pumping sand. We haven't been pumping all the water you thought we was, and we've been doing different things. And I really thought we were going in the right path. And that letter, when it came out, I thought we were gonna be loading people for the train station. That was out of line.
Well, it's not that all those efficiencies and all that work you guys have done hasn't made a big difference in the groundwater decline. It's just, you know, when our job is to regulate and distribute water across the state, and that's part of the job, is to make sure that those permits that we issue are being complied with. And if they're not, even if it's the owners, may not even necessarily be something they can control, because across the basin, it has an impact on wells, especially like Andy said, the older wells, it definitely does. And I'm not saying that the process that we've used in the past to issue permits or issue static water levels, reference levels, was perfect. But based on the information we had at the time, that when we issued those permits, we thought, that we were in a fairly safe place. And the reason we added these conditions was to keep it from getting too out of hand, and declines to get too out of hand. And so, again, it's not a perfect system. It hasn't been. I'll never say that we've done everything right in the past, but
I'll
I'll
second. But now, I also want to say this is everybody in Harney County now have to give you the static water limit? Are you saying everybody?
Only, what we're talking about tonight is only those that have that condition on their permit. If you don't have
So
that,
the old ones don't.
If they don't have that condition, then they
If
don't.
you haven't had it in the last 20 years, you probably don't have it.
Well, we started adding conditions in the nineties. Could be 30 years ago.
So you've gotten a static off of anything that's supposed to have them, you have got them, the owners have done it in the past.
Not all of them have done it.
So are they aware, have you certified letter any of them saying,
Will we
do you
send them?
realize you're going down to March 25th, or are you gonna wait till 26th?
No, they'll be getting a letter to remind them that their static water level.
Certified, so they know they
I
get it,
don't know if it'll be certified. It's coming out from,
so that you know they get it, just so you know they get it.
You gotta give them warning a week.
Tony, we're gonna pull up the slide. Jason covered this a little bit earlier in his presentation, just. We go back to the timeline slide. There's a little bit more information about that. So here,
so on the static water level measurement side. February, we'll send out a letter to those with the conditions, reminding them they need to report their static water level.
Can Iraq get a copy? You won't give us a copy of the 17 letters, but can
I'll
you?
give you a copy of, we have an example here, but if you just want the template, look at what the letter.
So that we know who you're sending that out to, so there might be some help.
Well, the reason that I haven't shared that information with everybody, and I have shared it with a few folks, but the reason I haven't is I don't know if those folks want that information shared. It is public
You're gonna
record.
shut their water up, they do, I'm sure.
It is public record, so,
Yeah.
I mean, anybody can submit.
I'm just saying to help you, help them. I mean, at least you get the statics to them.
Yeah, and like I said, we're gonna send out a reminder letter to everybody with that condition. And then, hopefully folks will get their static water level measurements in, by the end of March. And,
1 month.
and Tony, we've got a couple questions in the back, so if you
Okay.
don't mind. All right.
I'm not even here.
I'm on board for it being certified. We have a mail problem in this area. I mean, and it's not just a little problem.
Sure.
If it's registered mail, everybody's gonna get a letter. If you don't register it, I guarantee you, there's gonna be people that don't get a letter.
okay. I appreciate that.
Also, you have the plan that it's attached to the ownership through the county, or do you just send it to who's ever of record? Because a lot of stuff has been transferred and sold and moved.
Yeah,
And if you just send it to whoever's on the thing, there's a huge chance that they never get it.
Yeah.
Or they're in the process, it's on the contract of sale and that the other owner gets it and stuff. So I think, like Tony's saying, if you did give it to at least a public or some county officials or somebody that could track that down and make sure that you're sending it to the correct people, because it's gonna cause a lot of issues.
yeah, we'll definitely do that. Normally what we do is we look at, tax records, for the property to find the address for.
But sometimes if they're selling on a contract, the county tax records will still have the old owner's name on it and not the new owner's name.
Okay.
Just to point to that, we sold, some property with wells 3 years ago. I'm still getting the letter saying I need to report.
And I've sent in the
You
thing
can send
like
it all
3
in,
times.
and property, the
never
new
gets
property that we received, I've still not gotten access to be able to do the water use report.
Okay, so
3 years.
would you all recommend then that we have like somebody local go over that? Go
I
over the
would
list?
list of somebody that would conduct cross-reference or somebody with the county level or.
Yeah, I mean, is there somebody that we can rely on for that, or should we make Valley do
I think Kay does it kind of like this.
it?
Kay knows everybody.
It does know everybody, so I could,
I'll help down if you need to.
but I'm, happy to do what we can to make sure we get these letters to the right people.
If you have a well right now that you received a letter on and it's out of compliance, and I see your cutoff date's March 1st, and when you measure your wells this March, and that water level comes back up to where it's out of compliance, is that an automatic turn on, or does that have to go through a process
just, let Dally know if it's back above the threshold for decline, let him know.
Because in the conditions on the permit says that a determination will be made by the water department.
Mhm.
So that's you locally, it's not saying.
It'll be Dally, yeah.
Can we get that in writing?
I'd like to.
Where do you want to write it?
Well, just so
Yeah.
that it isn't a 3-month wait to everybody to make sure it does.
You know, I don't, we don't want to do that. We don't want to, make you
Your
wait.
measurement's gonna come in after, I see you have the deadline March first, so your measurement's gonna come in after March first, so your water is gonna be shut off, then you'll have to get it turned back on, so I didn't know if that would be,
At least it'll be off at the time anyways, but
Yeah,
I agree,
yeah, that should just be a little process. If you Dally.
just a phone call.
And I do wanna,
Oh, and he may need to, come up and verify that he agrees with the measurement on the site of that.
Yeah.
I do wanna acknowledge that we do have a comment online from Christopher Hall. He said, I'm gonna have to scoot closer because my eyes can barely see that. The permit conditions, made it perfectly clear that there was a risk in appropriating water, that the wells would be shut off if water levels drop below 25 feet. That risk is solely the irrigator's risk and no one else's. It has been a clear fact of the law. Blaming OWRD for what is the irrigator's responsibility to comply with the water right decline conditions. The law is unjustified. Every water right holder who agreed to decline conditions on the water rights they applied for or required knew they were misappropriating water when their annual groundwater levels fell below 25 feet. For those who did not measure groundwater levels annually, they are also responsible for not complying with the law. This type of pressure put on OWRD staff tonight is reminiscent of the very same pressure put on OWRD staff since the 90s to approve water rights in the basin. Thank you, Christopher Hall, for your comment. Does anybody in the room have any additional questions? Yes, sir?
So Jason and Ally, what is the department's stance on the senior water rights that have been affected by this? And you have junior water rights that have drilled a well within the last 15 years.
Mhm.
Where's the protection for the senior water right user when, the static levels change because more water has been allocated?
Mhm.
Okay, so does the department feel like it needs to maybe revamp where those static levels are within that certain area? I mean, they should take some responsibility
Yep.
for allocating that water. The permit that has dropped 25 feet. So give me an idea how the department wants to take a stance on that.
That's a great question, Louis. When those permits were issued, the department used the best available information they had at the time. Had we done, an extensive study at the time like we have now, today, we probably would have been better able to set those reference levels to an appropriate spot. But because we didn't have that information and all we really had was, just what levels we had on monitoring wells at the time, we didn't know if one well, how much it impacted another well a quarter of a mile away. And so if we don't know that this well is going to impact this well by, 15 or 20 feet, or if the whole basin is going to go down, or if there's, gonna be a difference between those two, whether they're, we didn't even know that there was similarities in the aquifer between those two wells, then we would issue that water right with the decline condition. And even though one might be senior over the other one, we don't have a mechanism now to go back and say, okay, we need to rethink your static water level and it should be here because that's what it was back in 95 before things really started to decline. We just don't have the authority to do that with our processes today. So unfortunately, we you know, like I said, we don't have a way to really say, we're gonna save this senior by reducing someone else's static water level, reference level on their permit.
So you're kind of doing a
It just feels
reset.
like the goalposts
We can't do a reset, yeah.
have moved on the senior water right because of what's happened over for the rest of the static levels. I mean, it's been declining. And so is there a way to go in and because I'm sure you turned off some senior water rights with these letters, or are going to.
Yep.
And yet across the way, the static levels are totally, much lower. So it just feels like that was the condition, and this is what you bought and paid for, and now whoops, we gotta, so that senior water right holder could go drill a new well with new static level with the same senior water right and fix this problem.
No, because if you're talking, if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is if senior drilled a new well, and then transferred his water right to that new well, no, because when you do a transfer, there's language in that transfer that says if water is not available at the original point of appropriation, then it's not available at the new one. And
It's
so,
kind of a reset. They make you cancel that water right and you don't pay for a new one, they reapply a new number to it.
well, if you wanted to cancel your original one, I mean,
That's what
We're not-
you made some do.
some may have done that. But we're not issuing new water rights today, as you know, in the basin, so we wouldn't be able to say, hey, you have a new static and a new priority date. As of today, and issue a water right for that, because, obviously we're not issuing more water rights.
Yeah, my point is the allocations after the fact that's drawing that down just doesn't seem fair to them.
No, I
For
agree.
those permit conditions that were set with that 25-foot drawdown.
Yeah, it isn't fair. The problem is that we just didn't have the information today that we have, or we didn't have that information back then that we do today. About the impacts, across the basin.
So old water rights are just as good as new ones.
As long as your static level's still good. And it's in certain areas, correct?
It's in certain areas, yeah. And, under the proposed critical rules, we will, once we start curtailing under those rules, that will be by priority date. So we will follow our appropriation then. But, you're right, when we issued these more junior rights with different reference levels, I think it's fair to say that it wasn't fair to do that. We just didn't have the information at the time to do anything different.
Yes, sir.
So, you said you didn't have that information, but am I correct in that you gave water rights in certain and other areas in this basin and didn't put that information in there, that decline?
The decline condition, to my
Yeah, there were
knowledge,
some permits in that same time frame that you guys didn't do the 25-foot drawdown, am I correct, during that time? So if you say you didn't have the information, then why did you not do it straight across the board? Because I don't understand.
well,
I
I'm
must
not,
have some information of something.
yeah, I'm not aware of any permits issued in the last 15 or 20 years in this basin for groundwater that don't have those conditions.
No, I mean, that when you said it was done in the 90s, I think you and I talked, there was there were some permits that were also, but because they were in maybe Riley or in a different area, even though they were in the basin and were hydroelectric connected, you guys didn't put the 25-foot in there, so you must have knew there was something.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been based at the time on groundwater reviews, based on what they thought was happening in that area. So it's possible that we issued permits without those decline conditions in other areas like Riley or other places where we didn't see, or the groundwater scientists.
They had some information that was a declining thing, and you guys went ahead and approved them with the 25-foot, so to say you didn't have any information,
Well,
because they had something.
If I said we didn't have any information, then I didn't then
I mean, not you, what, it's a state office, but they must have had something.
they certainly had some information because we've been collecting, static water levels across the state for some time.
Yeah, Jason, I think what I heard, and if I might clarify, you
Sure.
can tell me if I'm wrong or not. The agency had information in terms of the groundwater levels. Maybe what we didn't know is that by pursuing this path of adding the decline conditions, it would create this junior senior issue. That was not anticipated.
Sure.
That's the part that we didn't
Right,
know.
and part of the reason for that is, like I said earlier, we didn't know how one area, how connected or whether it was connected to another area until we did, the groundwater study to see that, a lot of this was connected. There are other places, and I'll give you an example. One of the places where we did actually issue a similar decline condition letter in Baker County was a well that had declined over 100 feet, and a well 200 feet away hasn't declined at all. We didn't see any impact to that well. So, there's certainly impacts in very localized areas in some areas and not in other areas where, like this basin, everything appears to be at least somewhat connected. That's not the case everywhere.
Yes, sir.
So Jason, what's the enforcement protocol when you say a well needs to be shut down?
So are you asking like what steps we would take if somebody doesn't shut down the well after we regulate it off? So if somebody doesn't shut down a well, say they got this letter and it says you're off in 2026. And then they decide they're gonna continue to pump beyond that, and we have knowledge of that they're continuing to, Valley will be out checking. And they continue, then we'll issue what's called a notice of violation, which means you're in violation of water, basically taking water that's been denied by the water master in that case, or using water without authorization. Once that is issued, usually that takes about a week or two maybe to get that out. And then, if they continue to use after they've received that notice of violation, then they can be assessed for civil penalties beyond that, which, we'd have to figure out what that rate could be, but it's between $250 and $1,000 a day for every violation, and each day would be a new violation. And so they could be, assessed that civil penalty.
So you could at least get first cutting up. So how would that fine be collected?
This is that question. So what's that?
We can follow up with more.
Yeah, we can follow up with exactly how that is, but it does come down to, generally taking somebody to court.
Has it ever been done in Harney County before?
Ooh. Have we ever assessed anybody? Yes, we have. We assessed someone, won't name names, but we assessed someone, multiple tens of thousands of dollars in Harney County for using water pretty much for a whole season on, one large pivot.
How long ago?
Within the last 10 years.
We do have a question online, Jason. They were asking if water rights are of no value.
Water right dates.
Water right dates are of no value.
No, there's certainly a value, yeah, like I was saying before, once we get to curtailment under the critical area, we will be following prior appropriation.
You should answer that, if your static level hasn't dropped, then they have value.
As long as you're complying with all of your permit conditions, they will have value. Thanks, Andy.
I got another question on, shutting the wells off. When you get a letter like that, you always have 60 days to appeal it. Does the 60 days for this start now, or will it start March 26th?
It starts when you receive the letter.
The second letter?
Yeah, the second letter. But the one, so we had rescinded the first letter, the second letter, you have 60 days,
So
yeah.
it starts now?
Yeah.
So it isn't after the.
It's not after
Take
March
effect.
2020.
It starts at 25 or 26.
It starts in 25. When you receive the letter. 'Cause that's
That
what
is
the order
important
is
to know.
That's the stat.
So to put a finer point on it, Jason, if somebody received, so we sent out the letters January 13th, 2025. Took a week to get there, so if somebody got their letter on January 20th, 2025, they have until March 20th, 2025.
You know, they have 60 days.
60 days.
Yeah, and it should say that in the actual letter, because it'll have one, it'll say.
Did you say that the postmark of the date it was written?
I'd have to look at the order. So it's in the property.
While we're looking that up, I think we have another question.
Yep. I understand that you have that 60 days. If you go past that 60 days, do you have any rights to say anything after that point?
There won't be, there's not an appeal process after that point.
That's important to know too.
But Jason, on the 17 letters that were sent out, they were all non-compliant because of static level.
Because those were just, they had triggered a decline condition, yeah, so they were below the 25-foot. Static level. So, yeah, maybe you can help me with this. But it says, petition for reconsideration may be granted or denied by the director, and if no action is taken within 60 days following the date of the petition, date the petition was filed, the petition shall be deemed denied.
I think it'd be good for us to follow up on.
Yeah,
that.
let's follow up
It's
on
really
that,
important.
because
We want to make sure we get the right information.
it is 60 days, but I
60 is for
can't tell you for sure yet
consideration.
on whether it's 60 days after you just see it or 60 days after it. So.
And as of now, there are no existing letters going out until you send out the 25th static. And said there's no cancellations that
There's
we don't know
nothing,
about.
yeah, there's nothing between now and when that reminder letter to your static goes out later this month.
So people can go get their mail, and there's been a lot of people afraid to get it.
Only thing that I will say is if we got something wrong, like, or, you know, we get a return because we didn't get the address right or the wrong one.
That's on the ones you're about to send out to remind everybody to use that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's no cancellation letter out and about right now. Everything's been retracted.
Well, and, you know, I mean, I know what you mean, but just to clarify, those aren't cancellation letters, they're just regulation. They don't cancel the water credit.
Kind of like cancel.
Sure, right.
We've got a year. Does environmental impact, does the business, the community impact on what this can do, will that help us any on how we send out the letters next year? And
Well, the thing, the RAG process goes before the commission. What he just stated is this process goes before the director.
so,
And so that's a huge difference to know.
Well,
This appeal for these letters of tripped permit conditions go before the director.
yes,
The RAG process, the director does not play a direct role in. He
Yeah.
gives recommendations that come
Sure.
from the RAG and present to the commission. That the commission is the final say in the RAG process
Yes.
for
the commission,
approval.
the commission too adopts the rules.
we still need to do that.
Yeah. And we still need to figure out what it still needs to go with,
Yeah,
within that presentation that could help navigate some of this.
yeah.
Any other additional questions on this piece of things? Letters, timeline? Correct.
I just think a lot of clarification on the 60 days, then what does it look at like after someone's, sent their bill in saying, I want a petition,
Yeah.
like kind of really, people need to understand what that process looks like. Is it 6 weeks? Is it 6 months? Is it,
Oh, after someone
yeah, even,
files for reconsideration.
is it, if a static water level comes back up and the permit condition's no longer tripped, then it all kind of gets set aside?
Yeah, and then it
Yeah.
really, you're able to continue to use water out of it.
And we do
But
have,
that's where, their concern is still that if my junior water right neighbor is still pumping next to me and I'm trying to recover my well, where's the law then? That's just, the biggest
Sure.
frustration with these particular wells that are probably most affected are that older
Right.
original
Mhm.
setting.
Yep.
Which is, going back to PTW and the rack processes, we're trying to set that and trying to set it within a sub-basin. We've got to figure this out, and we've got to be able to figure out how to address the permit conditions within that. Because we're gonna go off a priority date then,
Right,
but then you still have this permit condition in the back end.
well, yeah, the permit condition is always, is there, and it's, if the permit conditions aren't being complied with and we have that information, then, yeah, we are going to have to address it. As we would any regulation.
So unless there's a legislative fix to address it in some way,
Yeah, and
to me, that seems like the only thing that's a true way to navigate it into the future.
yeah, and I would expect, a legislative change would have to give the department the ability to change a water right that's already been issued. And I don't know, what other impacts that might have statewide. I mean, obviously that's gonna be up to the legislature to.
Which is why we were hoping to navigate it within a Harney County Division 512 RAC process, because that's not applied statewide.
Sure, well, and then, yeah, and I don't know how that might work, I mean, I don't know that we have the ability or authority to put something in the 512 rules to address a permit condition, because they are two separate things.
Does the commission have any authority within that realm to address?
I don't know that I can answer that.
Could we find out?
Yeah, we can look into that. I'll note that it is my understanding, we can verify that there is only one instance where the department can reopen up a permit or a certificate to add or change water rate conditions. The commission can, designate a critical groundwater area and we can pursue curtailment, but only in like a very narrow instance related to grant funding for above ground storage. And we change a water rate.
And those are in statute, where this is a rule process, and so a statute process would be.
That's why I think we need a statutory
Sure, and I
way to
think
fix it.
you're right, Kristen, I think if we were to address something with this permit condition, it would have to be a statutory thing rather than a rule, carve out, the rules, basically explain the statutes, and they can't modify existing statutes. The statute would be the deciding factor.
In reality, couldn't you call for your water, the senior water rights? Isn't it like a surface water? And then you'd have to turn all your neighbors off, all the way down below you.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying? I mean, you could start a community fight because you guys don't know how to manage it.
well, you
You know
could,
what I'm saying?
yeah, sure, I mean, you could call for your water, but then we would have to determine that your well is being impacted by this set of other wells, and then that doesn't really change the fact that you still have that drawdown condition on your permit. If you're still below that, then you would still be off. But if we determined that there were a set of wells around here that were directly the reason for that decline, we could theoretically shut those off, but I don't know that we have that information, which wells. directly impact you or to what degree.
This is why I find it ironic though, that we're going with critical groundwater designation, because in that, it has to be. All that has to be connected in a determinable way,
Sure.
but yet in an instance where a senior water right is saying they're being injured, then you're saying, well, we can't actually prove that you're connected.
Well, no, I'm not saying that. I mean, obviously there's connection there. You can see that through the critical or through the study that there's connection there. But if I were to shut off everybody within a quarter mile of Andy's well, I can't tell you how much of an impact that's gonna make. Whether it's gonna make him, recover back above his decline condition, because if he's 50 feet below. And we're seeing, maybe a foot to 2 feet of decline in that particular area. Most likely it's not gonna recover in a timely manner anyway. But I agree, they all are connected. At least that's what the groundwater study showed.
It's still challenging due to local knowledge of some of that to really buy into fully meeting the designation of the critical groundwater shortage.
And the problem is it took 30 years to decline 50 feet. It's a pretty high, it'll take 30 years to recover.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. And I think that's why they're, proposing the timeline that we have been, and I don't want to get into the, the 512, that's a different process than that, but I think that's part of talking about the adaptive maintenance, trying to make sure that we will be on the right track.
This is gonna make a really big bird refuge. Big.
All right. Any other questions on this particular piece of regulation?
Comment in the chat.
We've got a comment from Christopher Hall. The reasonable water use management action is to stop all misappropriations of water in the basin before the Water Resource Commission imposes corrective control orders regulating off lawfully operating water rights following the critical groundwater area process. Thank you, Christopher. Anything else from folks in the room? If not, we will be in here for the next 15 minutes or so. If folks have any additional questions you want to follow up. Your points of contact for this are going to be Jason and Dally. So if you've got additional questions to follow up, make sure you contact them. We'll try to get you some answers. Thank you so much for coming out. Appreciate it. Thank you folks for attending online. Have a good evening.
I know.